The budget in many ways is traditional Labor stuff. Now, we've got pretty much nothing for anybody who's deemed to be wealthy. We have an unpopular government that you'd think would be just turning on the taps and splashing cash around and doing its very best to buy people's votes. And yet it's not doing that. To Wayne Swan's great credit, and I do think he deserves some credit for this, he has stuck to, well, pretty much the last political promise they haven't broken, and that is to come up with a modest surplus this year. So Wayne Swan is actually making the tough decisions. Yes, he might be trying to win back a few traditional Labor votes, but he's certainly not going to gain too many supporters in the leafy eastern suburbs of Melbourne or Sydney. So I find this budget curious because, as I said, the heavy lifting is being done by the entity, the government, which needs people's votes to survive, and one might say that's a fruitless task, but there it is. And yet the easy decisions, to cut rates if things look a bit grim, is being left to the Reserve Bank, which normally likes to act in the reverse fashion. Now, there's a lot of contradictory things. So whereas I'll praise Wayne Swan for at least fulfilling the alleged promise of getting back to a surplus, and I say alleged because we don't really know if a surplus is going to eventuate, my guess is that if you look at the forward growth estimates of 3.25%, that's probably not going to be met in the next 12 months, and you only need perhaps 0.5% of economic growth not to materialise, and the $1.5 billion surplus is pretty much out the window. Well, one of the few surprises in last night's budget, because most of it had been leaked beforehand, was that the cut in the company tax rate from 30% to 29% isn't occurring. And yet I didn't see any changes to the increase in superannuation. So for all of us in the room who are business people and who employ others, and are wondering just how we're going to have this rather delicate negotiation with our workers as to who pays for that 3% increase in super over the next few years, I can tell you the corporate tax cut that was supposed to come up with at least part of it obviously isn't going to occur. That is rather odd. There are some questionable assumptions behind this budget. As I said, I don't believe the growth forecast for a moment. I know that Treasury and the RBA and the government are all saying growth in the current year or the year to come will be 3.25%. We'll be lucky to get 2.5% in my view, and that's why I don't think the surplus next year will eventuate. But it doesn't matter. We look at surpluses ahead of time, not when they actually occur. Look at yesterday's March trade figures. If you want any evidence that maybe things aren't quite going according to plan, we had the biggest trade deficit, I believe, in 5 years for the month of $1.6 billion. Imports are staying up there, and why wouldn't they with the strong Australian dollar? And we've already heard this morning that it can't fall any further than $1.02 minus 5 cents. That's going to encourage people to keep spending money overseas and keep travelling, but it isn't very good for our trade deficit, which is going in the wrong direction. As I've made pretty clear, I think that the increased tax on any form of super is pretty dumb, and if I was a business owner, I'd be getting quite worried about how we're going to pay for that increase from 9% to 12%. You try telling hard-pressed workers at the moment that it should come out of their pay packets and look out, but it's got to come out of someone's pay packet, either business profits or workers' wages. There is nothing else. The government isn't going to pay for it. We know that austerity is not very popular anywhere in the world, and no one wants to see rioting in the streets. But I think we are in for a period of relative budget austerity at both the state and federal level here in Australia. And I guess finally, given this is technically a mid-term budget for the Australian Labor Party, what probably Joe Public, who might or might not consider re-voting for that party, wanted to see last night was a loaves and fishes trick. That is, as of course from the biblical reference, Jesus was somehow magically able to conjure a lot of food for a lot of people seemingly out of thin air. Previous treasurers have been quite good at doing that. Wayne Swan is amongst them. However, this time around, there are no loaves and certainly no fishes. Thank you very much.